Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The show is about to begin.
Hi, I'm Terri Long.
And I'm Jeremy Eden, and we are the co-CEOs of Harvest Earnings.
Welcome to the Elephant in the Boardroom.
Hi, Terri.
Hi, Jeremy.
So I know we were recently reminiscing about narcissists we have worked for and some we've worked with. I think so far we've done a good job of not hiring any to work for us.
Knock on wood.
And that has raised some interesting issues we thought we would share.
Yeah. So everybody, I think, just because narcissism in some degree exists a lot, so everybody has worked with or for or has somebody work for them that's a narcissist. So we think the dealing with the narcissist, which is super, super, super hard. Honestly, one of the first things you have to do is understand where they're coming from. So we thought we would just quickly go over the DSM, which is the psychologist Bible of how to diagnose things, for NPD, a narcissistic personality disorder. Now, I guess there's maybe some controversy about whether or not this is going to change, or maybe it's been removed. I don't know, but these traits still certainly apply to everything we're going to talk about. So there's 9 of them. Here they are. Grandiose sense of self-importance, including exaggerating achievements and talents. Boy, we have seen that. Preoccupation with fantasies, particularly about unlimited success, power, beauty, or ideal love. A sense of entitlement, having an unreasonable expectation of favorable treatment. Exploitative behavior, taking advantage of others to achieve personal goals, like, maybe not paying your vendors. Lack of empathy, being unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. Well, lack of empathy. Envy, being envious of others or believing that others are envious of them. Arrogance, displaying arrogant or haughty behaviors or attitudes. A sense of self-superiority, and finally, a need for excessive admiration.
And while we certainly aren't recommending anybody try to make a medical diagnosis, I think all of these act as good signposts to think, I have a situation here that I need to think very carefully about how to deal with, about which with to deal.
That is nonsense with which I shall not put.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I guess our first recommendation, which is completely impractical in many situations, is to run far, far away. Run, Forrest, run. But you can't always do that, particularly if it's, your mother, your whatever, your boss, and you really need the job, or, you need the job at least for some period of time before you find another. But yeah, first thing would be to examine the pros and cons very carefully on whether or not it makes sense to stay in an environment where you are in the circle of a serious narcissist.
And the reason we give that as the first bit of advice is, unlike a lot of other, human traits people have, when someone has some combination of at least some of these in, as an important part of who they are, you cannot change it. And so often narcissists, certainly that I worked for, that you and I worked with, can be charming, can be highly successful, can have ways of making you feel very good about yourself. And you end up thinking, if I can just manage the other attributes, sort of polish them down somehow or avoid them or whatever, then this could be good and satisfying. And it turns out it always will end in tears.
Yes, Mr. Demjack.
Yes. For a CFO who is definitely not a narcissist, but who once said that about a business situation.
And he, just for the record, he is now CEO, but he was CFO when he said it.
Terrific.
So, highly likely you cannot change a narcissist. And as you said, there are those good moments where you feel like, well, this person who has presented themselves as superior, and maybe you've bought into that at the moment, or you see positive traits, because there usually are some, they're just maybe exaggerated a bit. It makes you feel special. If this special person has included you and embraced you in their orbit. It's not until they turn on you, which inevitably they will. One of the major problems with working with somebody, and this really applies to your personal life as well.
Absolutely. Sure.
Narcissists cannot deal with criticism. It is just extremely difficult. So how do you ever give feedback to a narcissist without a potential blow up? One of the things we would say is avoid any sort of public confrontation, because that is doubling down on a narcissist trait that they do not like to be criticized. So you've got to do this as gently as possible. So yes, do you have to walk on eggshells when you're dealing with a narcissist? Well, if you want to prevent an explosion, yeah.
And we talked about working for a narcissist, working with a narcissist. If you happen to have a narcissist working for you, and again, they might be a high performer in some ways. They may have a lot of positive attributes that help you do your job. Nonetheless, it really is your obligation both to yourself and to the organization to remove them from the organization, because if you believe that somehow you'll change them or you'll foist them on some other part of the organization and somehow they'll be a better fit, that does not work.
I should point out, when you say that, you're not talking about just the person who has a little bit of narcissism.
No, because then I probably would have been fired a number of times.
Oh, there you go. We are talking about the extremes on the scale.
Absolutely.
Truly diagnosable.
And the extremes take the following forms, a few of them that we'll talk about, and you just raised one, which is the ability to take in feedback, being challenged. Sure, I have a strong or large ego. People know that. But in my case, I'm able, sometimes immediately, sometimes with reflection, but to listen to criticism and being challenged and getting feedback and change myself. We're talking about the person who can't do that. And if you think about that in the workplace or your personal life, that's the problem. And it does mean that if they have that attribute and you can't leave or disassociate yourself, how do you make sure that the arguments you want to put forward or the feedback you want to give is something in terms of what benefits them and done privately? So it's not, you're bad at this, you should change this. It's, you are so much better than everyone else at this. And if you did it even more, and I know it sounds disgusting and horrible.
It does sound disgusting and horrible, and it's kind of making my skin crawl. But I think the way we were talking about it the other day was a little less skin crawling. It's more about framing something to how it will benefit them. It was said to us that the extreme narcissist doesn't care at all about the company they're working for. And a lot of people fall a bit into this, right? They care about their own career and their own status and pay and all of that. So instead of framing some business case that this is going to be really good for the company, you got to frame something as this is how it will be really good for you and your career and your status.
And then another behavior that's very corrosive and harmful that a narcissist might have that other people don't is this anger management kind of where they can't manage their anger. And suddenly they are lashing out in very hurtful and harmful ways. And again, professionals might be able, professional psychologists, someone might be able to work with such a person. But, a normal employee in a company, you're not going to change or fix that. And so it's this talk about eggshells. It's about trying to understand what are those triggers for that person and how do you avoid those triggers. But also when it happens, to essentially try to then take the person on, because it's simply, not going to work.
No winning situation.
Yeah. And there's an interesting thing about narcissists that is, let's say, ironic or paradoxical. It's believed that a good part of this behavior is driven actually by complete lack of confidence, great insecurity, and needing people in the world to be heaping praise and rewards and so forth to overcome that. Which means that if you witness behavior or it's aimed to you that's bad and you think somehow taking the person on will help, you're actually just pouring gasoline on the fire, because you're just getting more at those insecurities and lack of confidence.
Yeah. Well, you're kind of reminding me of someone who works for us who is the absolute opposite of a narcissist, whatever that is. I don't know. We're going to turn this team around 360. Yeah, that is, I digress. And so, I have a son who got a job at Microsoft. I think it was the Microsoft job, not the Google job. But, this person had a son who graduated, still does have a son, who graduated from MIT and got a job at Google. But she was, there was no hint of, oh, well, my kid did it sooner, or, any of that. It was, oh, that is just so great, so amazing, so wonderful. No, what am I trying to say? No hint of envy or, I want to show you up.
Right.
I don't need to exaggerate or even remind of my children's accomplishments. I mean, it just the absolute opposite of exaggerating accomplishments. We had somebody who worked with us at one point who said he was on a board that he wasn't on, said he had won things, medals, letters, I don't really know what they were called, in college. Yeah, that he hadn't. And why? We knew him well. We knew his capability. We knew he was super smart. We had known he was a good athlete even, but had to make it even a bit more.
Even though easily checkable.
Yeah, easily checkable. But we on those things sort of chose to go, all right, well, I mean, we all knew it was true, and I mean, it wasn't true, and in some respects, that's the you don't have to call on it because everybody knows, and that's the punishment, sort of, or the consequence, But calling him on it would have just been a big battle and wouldn't have accomplished anything. So I think not engaging with.
On the other hand, it's when those set of behaviors became sufficiently bad that, we were willing to completely disengage.
Yeah. Yeah. At some point, you say enough.
Even at quite some, potential risk, because at some point you go, my skin is crawling more than I'm willing to let it crawl.
Life is too short.
And, to this point about envy, I mean, in the workplace, this is so important because you might have two leaders of different areas, and if one always has to win, then their ability to work with the other, support the other, make the other a hero, is almost non-existent. And so you don't get the kind of collaboration that really is essential to running a good organization, be it a business organization or any other kind of organization.
Yeah. And it's important, I think, to not take these things personally when you're in the situation. But of course, that's easier said than done. But don't take it personally, and also get some support. I mean, you've got to at least have somebody that you can vent to about these behaviors. So in some sort of stress relief for yourself, be it working out or, meditation, whatever, because it is very stressful to be in the inner circle repeatedly of an extreme narcissist.
Your dog will be willing to listen to every complaint that you have. Just look up with you loving eyes. So.
Yeah, but I mean, dogs are great for stress relief, but you might need more. I don't know.
You might need.
So I feel like we don't have a lot of great advice for working with narcissists because there is very limited that you can do other than some things that would be considered sort of sucking up. And we can't recommend that. It certainly is a long-term coping strategy. So that's why the main point is get out if you can.
And there's one last thing I think we should say, which is when there's a narcissist in a position of power, they can be incredibly corrosive within their area, across areas. And so there's a real obligation for the people above them to not tolerate that person. And this is true with boards tolerating narcissist CEOs tolerating narcissist members of their exec committee, and so forth. And it's not that this happens that often, but when it does, I think it's very challenging for the board or the CEO or whomever to deal with it. And the sooner they do, the better everybody feels, because there's a lot of people that get hurt by these narcissists.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
And it's hard, I think, when it's a personality issue that makes it even harder. If it was a performance issue, that's one thing. But to say, oh, well, he's mean to people, or, she yells at them, it's just it's a little more nebulous. And I mean, the excuse is that, well, but the person who was complaining about it is thin skinned or just needs to suck it up because that's just life. But we had a head of operations for Heinz Europe, I'll just say it, who said something wasn't fair to the head of, I don't know what his title was, but his boss. And the guy said, life's not fair. And the head of operations said, well, it should be. And I agree with that to the extent possible. I mean, obviously, there's many things not in control, that we're not in control of whether something's fair or not. But when we are, let's try and make it thus. Okay, cheers. Bye.
Okay, cheers.